Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to another exciting episode of Psychology Talks. And today we're going to discuss the art of heart centered leadership. Usually, when we think of business, what comes to our mind is a very cutthroat environment, a competitive environment where everyone trying to prove themselves, and it is usually considered a place of Armageddon rather than having empathy or compassion. But thank goodness that there are some great leaders like Paul Gunn, who is on the mission to shift the paradigm of this business culture and replace the cutthroat corporate culture with kindness and compassion and empathy. Paul Gunn is a thought leader, a change maker. He is the CEO of KUOG Corporation and a Wall Street Journal bestselling author of the book Succeed the Right Way. He's an expert in the field of logistic and supply chain, and he's on the mission to change this entire the business culture, which is considered to be more competitive and less of a human culture. So let's welcome Paul. Hello, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Breen. How are you doing?
Yeah. So I just gave a little bit of introduction, but tell our audience about yourself. That what is your background? What is your childhood like? How did you come into this field? So our audience will get to know you better.
Well, thanks. A little bit about me. I premise that would possibly saying I'd consider myself a vessel for overflowing into others, and that had a lot to do with the way our parents raised us. My dad was kind of a physically imposing figure, but he put a lot of emphasis on seeking those things that are eternal, how you engage with other people. Are you trying to do your best to live a life that's going to impact them beyond that? Our mother would also make sure she kept those things rooted within us and place a collective foundation on valuing those things, even if we didn't attain much monetary wealth. They wanted us to focus on those things that ultimately would determine where we would end up eternally, so to speak. So, from that, even with all the adversities we've gone through, I kind of fell into this role. My dad was a former DCA auditor for the government. My brother came back from serving after the towers went down. I hadn't seen him in 4 years, so we jumped at the opportunity when our dad suggested, you know, would us two like to go into business together, and we kind of formed that and went into an area at that time where many people weren't looking to develop contracts or source it. And that was kind of where we got started in supplying material. But it was more of a genesis of when my brother was over there, he would talk about how they needed stuff. And for the most part, I just wanted my brother home. So when I had the opportunity to jump at being kind of an arm to help our warfighters get home and help allies, we jumped at it, knowing ultimately we're trying to help somebody get home safely by providing them what they need.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
sorry. I think
yeah,
I
I
was
just
on the muted.
yeah.
So anyway, so thank you so much. I think your mission you shared is very inspiring. That you're bringing home people safely, which is I'm sure a lot of people are stuck somewhere and they need a way out, and then you're helping them. So so your current is expertise is logistic and supply chain. So how it can relate to your business and your what you're doing.
So that's a great question to bring. I would say those probably in it realized how much trust builds if we're ultimately taking the ownership of an order or an item. We have to depend on those all the way internally and those down the food chain, so to speak. So If someone tells us they're going to meet a date and it's not met, then that ultimately falls back on us, and then ultimately falls back on me, basically having to go to a customer saying, "Hey, we're not going to make it, and this is the reason why." And you can get a few chances. Sometimes you don't get any chances if you make the error, and you're kind of hindered. So it plays a big role in being able to stay in communication with vendors, and with all the stuff that's going on with the pandemic. Sometimes that's just not everyone's going to want to be truthful, whether they want to say that they're either struggling or something's just messed up with their own supply chain. So if you're working to build a relationship to understand what are their risks, what are their concerns that you can convey back to your team and your partners, it plays a massive role in just making sure it's smooth, because things do happen, stuff's going to happen, and get delayed.
Yeah, that's true, I think. So, when actually did you realize that, especially in the business, I know that you've been on the mission to change it with kindness and empathy. And so, I mean, what made you pursue this role to shift this paradigm and bring kindness and compassion in the business world?
So that's kind of a web. See, it was a combination of a lot of things. And one, I would say, when we first started the company, how we saw the last company, how we saw people engage with each other and how it was meaningful. And prior to that, when I was kind of in my pruning process before the businesses even started, I'd say, blessed to be around someone who had extreme wealth and they started from nothing. And when I saw how they treated people and valued the intangibles of them, it brought home all the stuff that we saw our parents teach us about how this is impactful. And he leveraged that in all of his business ventures. He was more focused on the character of people than the experience of them. Yes, it mattered. Yes, talent mattered. But when it came down to it, if he made a gut decision, he was going to go based on what he saw in the character. For example, he'd have people come to his house, and unassuming, he would be dressed as he'd be as the gardener, and if the people would be disrespectful to him, he told them, hold on, he'd wait, he'd come around the front door and basically dressed who he was and tell him he's not doing business with him, just because of how, if you couldn't handle something simple like this, he didn't want to be involved in the decision. And then from there, a real pivotal moment for me was when we were placing an order, and there was a former, well, the Marines are always Marines, but he was a Marine, and he went on for 5 minutes thanking me how he was in the unit that we helped save and retrofit. Even though we didn't build it, we helped supply a lot of the parts in. And when that hit home to me, already how important our work was, it just let me know it just really matters. Every little thing we're doing, it's going to ultimately save somebody's life. So approaching vendors and people with kindness to realize a deeper mission was what drove me after that moment. It really hunkered down.
Yeah, that's true. But don't you think that it's very difficult to actually convince them that you are kind and not weak? Because mostly what happens is it's oftentimes it's taken as weakness rather
Yeah,
than in its strength. Like people
yeah,
think that maybe you are either manipulating them or maybe you are not enough competitive enough to be at this position. So how do you deal with that?
You talk about it, the algorithm life, even with your own book. You have to basically, I learned in the process, it can't always take it personal. To give you, for example, I called one vendor one time. He told me he's God to me, he's God to the end user, and he's God to anything else I do. So if I want to deal with him, then I need to essentially kneel to him. So I had to basically tell him, look, despite how I feel, please consider the the mission larger at hand. So it takes time. It doesn't always happen. It's not on an immediate phone call. It's not on an immediate email exchange. It's a process. I feel when you're authentic, I know it gets kind of watered down authenticity, but if you
Yeah.
keep pressuring and going forward to be able to speak what you know is truth, they're eventually gonna come over and warm. Sometimes they won't, but yes, those actions of consistency are gonna matter.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I think it's more about giving unconventional
Yes.
rather than expecting anything, and when you're trying to give something or being kind. But at sometimes what I've seen is that especially it is very hard to be kind with unkind people, because they usually think that it is their right to be unkind. And it's so how do you tackle those situations, especially in the business environment, when people think that it's their right to be competitive rather than being kind or being human. So how do you keep the balance?
So I read a lot. I try and mirror the news, mirror reading, mirror actions that are in industries that are opposing that overlap. Because to be frank, it's difficult to use that and show if you don't have leverage. Leverage, you gotta have leverage. Do you have position on the contract? Do you have a position on the vendor? Do you have any intel on their competitors that's gonna be utilized in that to doing it? So yes, it's a combination of utilizing the leverage, but still being kind in the process. Because yes, it's difficult to go in somewhere where they've got all the leverage, they've got all the market position, they've got a hold on there. So somewhere in there, most people they will have it. So I got to read a lot. You got to find out where their gaps are, and then when you have this information, you're able to operate in a position that works well to you. Almost for the example, like when your parents would catch you lying and they give you the opportunity to tell you the truth, they have the leverage. So they're being kind, knowing they already have the drop basically on you to give you that chance to do it. So you spend most of your time trying to gain the leverage so you can ask it. So yes, difficult it was at the very beginning where no one knew who we were, didn't know how we operated. So and that was a mind stamp for me to remember, okay, when we gain leverage, I'm going to remember how they treated. I'm going to remember this. And when those situations came back, when we were in the position, I still extended the kindness, but you were mindful of how people have their human nature. So some of those situations worked out well. Some of them, I had a learning experience, even offering the kindness. You're stabbed in the back so many times,
Yeah.
but you got to gain. I would say you got to gain leverage. So it
Yeah.
is difficult. It is difficult.
Yeah, that's true. I actually, when I was actually reading your book, and then you've given some example that your company has taken a hit of like some losses, but
Yes.
just you actually maintain the integrity and you did not compromise on just temporary gains, rather than building a proper, having like integrity and having values and follow the right path rather than going or chasing the temporary gains, which is actually really, I would say, courageous in this kind of business environment. Because I would just tell you that, especially when I actually read your book, it has a very great impact on me. I used to think of the business environment as, like I mentioned, there is a very cutthroat and competitive environment. I used to work in the corporate world, and I've seen that how these competitors are fighting against each other, like trying to hide some information, taking advantage of this. And long time back, I'd read the novel that's Godfather, and there was a quote in that. It's like every fortune has certain like crime behind it. So, and that was true in some cases, because whenever whichever business model I see, even if you look at the giant corporate like tech giants who have certain kind of, I would say, like things against, like which is not lawful, which is not correct. They are using some privacy of the consumer. So, like it's very difficult to talk about integrity and kindness and compassion, which is definitely a difficult route. But as you mentioned, that it is difficult, but it's not impossible. So that's really impressive. Okay, so let's talk about heart-centered leadership. What exactly it is in your opinion?
So to me, it seems like there's more research coming out about how potent the electromagnetic field is around the heart than the brain. And I think one of the recent ones was it's 5,000 times more potent than the heart. So it's utilizing what is internally anchored within you to combine logic. That's the simple way I would use it. But that gut, that gut that comes over you. For me, it's an overwhelming sense something's not right. I don't. It's just you meet someone and something's either instant, and then your antennas go up either for the good or the bad. So utilizing what it is you feel and mirroring it towards what's you have as intelligence to look at each terrain and where do you apply wisdom of the heart to leverage what you're feeling, sensing, and you know to be true with the leverage that you have. But it's taking into others into consideration how your actions ultimately are going to impact them.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is it's more like related with intuition. It's
Yeah,
basically following your gut feeling, following your intuition rather than, I mean, because if you study like all these great leaders, they all always talk about intuition. Like Steve Jobs always talk about the intuition, following the heart. Because I think it's more important in the business environment, especially these days, where sometimes you need to take decisions which may not or which appear to be not very logical, but
yeah.
you need to follow your heart. And I think that is the key component of the heart-centered leadership. So coming back to the next question, that how it applies when you are dealing with the people, especially when you're building a team, and not everybody is convinced to follow this heart-centered leadership. So how you, for example, if you have certain strategy and let's say your board is against it or the people are against it, so this is the major dilemma which I feel that especially in the business we need to convince our partners, our competitors, or basically or the stakeholders to take a decision, but going against the logical ones. How you deal with this?
Yeah, that's a great question because my response may not always be logical because I give you from my own personal opinion. When I was trying to seek jobs or was working in corporate or trying to do it, the logical response to some of the ideas I had was not. It was like you're not hearing what I'm saying. You're not looking at the bigger picture. So I always would make a mental stamp. If I was ever in a position, what is it that a team member that first you're going back like you're talking about when the team members need to see it or be benefit from it, what do they have that they're not essentially telling because of positional power, simply because of a title or something, they don't want to be able to say it and convince your team executives how do you interact with someone, because yes, they're going to be opposed by it because they don't see the logical financial benefit from it. So the convincing of it is usually, I was in this position before, and here, think of how you would feel in that position where it's going. Take those intangibles that are being involved or not being heard from your team as to what could happen. Because with quiet quitting going on right now, you don't know. They could be looking for something else. So it's mindful to consider how do you express yourself that you're caring for them or you're being involved to lead people and you don't want to hear or be that example or funnel for them to come towards. But it's not easy. Each day I ask myself, is this something that really works? Has it mattered? Because daily you run into people who just do not value or see the importance of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Okay, so like going one step back, this is like, of course, when you know something that this is right to follow, right? And that is when you hear your maybe the intuition or you hear the inner voice that is guiding you. So, how do you actually decide that what is right, especially going against all the rational things? Because the listening to intuition is a very tricky part, and especially when the risk is involved, it becomes more difficult to follow intuition. So how do you actually uh, find the right way to follow your intuition, or how do you listen to intuition? Simple.
So if my body feels like it's completely out of line, like to go against the grain, where it's fully, where nothing is making sense, even with the logic. So I'll step out of my own intuition or intuitive sense and say, let me look at this logically. And if it cannot get back into the sense of this just doesn't feel right and it's not making sense. So if it's too comfortable or it just feels like, all right, I can go with the flow of it, I'm not going to, at that point, then you stand up and kind of drop the hammer and saying, well, this is where we're going to do. If at any point what goes on here does not make logical sense, then you guys as a team, let's kind of recalibrate it and go forward from there. But if it goes out of uncomfort, then I'm not going to do it. Yeah. I think you're on mute. No, I think you're on mute.
Oh, I don't know how it. So actually, the comments are not showing. A lot of people are joining, and somehow it's not showing. So I think if I just go and check my LinkedIn, like they're like Heather is joined, and I also commented, but actually it's not appearing, so I can't read it properly. So I really apologize. I don't know what's the technical glitch here, but somehow it's not showing. Otherwise, I can see all the comments, and a lot of people have already joined. And unfortunately, I cannot see it here. There's something wrong, apparently. I don't know, but I hope there is recording properly.
But I
So,
can give you the context then
okay.
of why. I had an accident when
Mm-hmm.
I was in Canada once,
Okay.
and I saw essentially my life flash before my eyes essentially. And in when I was getting up, my dad had basically like said, "Son, I was just praying for you." And I think at that moment I said, "All right, whatever I do from this point on, I'm going to be mindful of what flows inside me and what is sought on the eternal sense." So, yes, it can seem like I listen to that intuition because I feel my life saved on that bridge. There was nowhere else for me to go. It was on a bridge, nothing. And my car and my life was saved. And I made a point then saying, from here on out, I'm going to be mindful of whatever people want to call it their belief. I believe that that was a purpose for me, and I'm mindful of the cues that my body takes in there. So yes, I do pay attention to logic. It is mindful to be hearing what the wise counsel says, and you take it and then you apply it.
Yeah, I think that's usually something. Or like whomever, like I've interviewed several people, and lots of people actually pointed out that there is some event or maybe the trauma when they go through, then they realize there may be the hidden potential or they find their purpose. So I think that's what you're saying, that if that event made you realize that there is something deeper attached to it, and
Yep.
that's that's going on in this world, or maybe, and we need to look for some cues which guides us in the right direction, and those cues may not be in alignment with rational thinking or logics, but those cues are or maybe the cues from God or from the universe that are guiding us to the right path. So I think that's quite, I would say, amazing.
Yeah, and you
So,
talk about the cues from interviewing and asking, when do I make the decision? So if someone wants to bring in a logical response, but you listen to the tonality, I watch their body language, I watch the tone in the email. How confident are they in this logic? Are they sure? Where did they get the information from? How are they pulling this all in? So if something is off with how they're trying to present why their logic is, that it's not weighted enough for me to go against what I feel in there, then I kind of try to rebalance and, okay, here, this is how I feel. Can you help me understand logically what's not right? And if there's a hesitation and they're not so sure, then I'm saying, see, this is what I saw. I'm watching all the nonverbal cues that are being pushed and the reason for the strength of their argument to come in and collectively make that decision. So it's the nonverbal cues I look for and go and who wants to go against it to convince them.
yeah, I think that's quite intelligent to actually read read between the lines, and that's how it is. And what I was just saying that usually these cues, or actually, I was just thinking that there is a someone that said that if you tell lies, or if you tell truth, you don't have to remember. So I think that's how you like people catch people off guard, that
Yeah.
if they're lying or something, they have to make build a story, and they have to connect. And if you just ask a little bit of logical question, they will be lost in there. So that's, I think, the very intelligent way. So tell us about your book. You launched your book last year, right? So what was the reason behind writing a book, and why did you write that book?
So both Logan and I are severely asthmatic. And when I saw what COVID was, I didn't know if it was going to take me out. And that was the primary thing, saying, all right, if this thing gets a hold of me and I cannot breathe and it takes me out because I have a compromised respiratory system, I wanted Logan specifically to see how my dad raised us and our parents raised us. So I started to write it kind of as a letter to him. And then as I was posting or writing the articles on how I viewed what leadership meant and what it meant to me, I started to get back channel between LinkedIn and different emails on Paul, you have something there. So I decided to write kind of my story and what it meant to me and how I would hope young entrepreneurs or those who were making pivots at that time to start businesses would see that you have the potential to leverage wisdom of the heart and show empathy as a trait, coupled with the logic that many of them had to make an impact and succeed the right way. So there's no right way to succeed. Essentially, it's succeed what's right with you. So whatever talents and gifts you have in that's positioning, you're succeeding the right way for what's current and best for your situation. And that's kind of the context of succeed the right way. It's your way, but be mindful of the eternal impact you have on others.
Yeah, actually, it's a great book, and I really admire like that your whatever you've shared, your learning, your wisdom. It's really great. It changed the perception of the business management, and it's really great. So I will share the link of the book also in the comment, so people can check out your book on the Amazon. I know this is the topic that we can go on talking about this, but the time of the show is limited, and it's almost reaching to the end.
Okay.
So, what one piece of advice would you give to our audience today to succeed the right way?
So you talk about it often. I would say what's internal. Now, what there's a purpose, or whether you're going through a pruning process or not, seek to look towards what internal impact can be made from that, and then align that to follow what drives you to get excited about and find your purpose in that. So align your passion, purpose for what's excitement. I know people say it all the time, but that played a massive role into me because when things come that are not easy to deal with, it's that purpose that's rooted in that I see beyond it.
Yeah, I think actually the purpose gives us the
Yep.
direction, the
Mhm.
meaning of life, and that gives the motivation to follow through whatever we are doing in life. Like I was reading the book of the Viktor Frankl, and he survived the Holocaust just because this he has realized the purpose. So just imagine that if he can survive that kind of environment just because that he had realized the purpose, and he knew uh, he wanted to write the book, and he just wanted to live uh, and survive that difficult time. So I think anybody can survive the challenges and difficult time if they realize their purpose. So okay, so what is the best way to reach out to you? Like I know you're active on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
but is there
LinkedIn works.
any other
Yeah,
any way?
LinkedIn or my email is the fastest. Email usually is the fastest. Do you want to put it in the comments or it's
Okay.
Paul Jr. at KUOGINC.com, but LinkedIn is probably the fastest.
Okay, so I think I'll just share your email also in the
Yeah,
comment after this show. So whoever wants to reach out to Paul, please connect with him and uh, find out like how he can help you in that.
yeah.
So thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today and sharing your wisdom with us. And I'm sure our audience have learned a lot from you today. And I'm sorry, I don't know why the comments didn't show today. And I know a lot of people have joined and they shared the comments, but it's somehow not visible to us, and I can't respond to them. I will definitely check out all the comment and respond to all the comments after the show. So thanks to all those who joined and
Yeah.
commented, but we cannot read that comment. So, anyways, thank you so much and have a great day.
All right.
Okay. Bye.